welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I'm your host, Tim Spring, and today I'm joined by Indicio's VP of Communications and Governance, Trevor Butterworth. And he's here to give us an overview of what exactly decentralized identity governance is. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, Trevor. Would you mind starting us off with just a quick introduction and a little bit about yourself?
My pleasure. I'm one of the co-founders of Indicio, and governance falls under my remit. My career covers journalism, science communication, and now technology. So that's about it.
Nice. Well, no, that sounds like quite a bit of expertise you're bringing to the table here.
Age. I bring age to the table.
Well, that brings wisdom, hopefully. So when we say governance in pertaining to decentralized identity, would you be able to kind of define that for us? What do we mean when we say governance?
Sure. So the word governance sort of denotes for many people corporate governance, which is, who's accountable for what, and who sets the rules, and how the rules are administered, and audits and all of that sort of thing. So you have that meaning. Then, and that pertains to a certain degree to decentralized identity, who's in charge, who's accountable, who sets the rules. But it also combines a sort of the technical policies, rules, and procedures that govern the use of the technology, both from a high level in terms of standards and protocols, but also in specific use cases, how you're going to use the technology to achieve your ends. And so when we talk about governance and decentralized identity, we're kind of talking about a hybrid of these two. And that can be confusing because if you're on the business or corporate side, you're thinking one thing. And if you're an engineer or, coming from the technical side, you're thinking tech stacks. And it also can be a source of complexity because, good governance is usually just, framed in terms of, sort of clarity and simplicity. Whereas any technology is going at some point to be involved discussing complexity. So decentralized identity governance combines both of these things together. And it's essentially how we operate the technology in order to achieve the ends of decentralized identity, which are verifiable data and identity, privacy preservation, and enhanced security, and being able to share data without integrating databases, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. So how does governance achieve that, right? That the end goal is, identity security and all those good things of knowing who you're talking to online. What are the policies in place, or, what technology really achieves that goal through governance?
So, given that what I've just given you is a sort of a high-level definition, when we're actually talking about implementing governance, we're kind of talking about three elements or three areas. There's once you've decided you're going to use this technology to solve a problem, or to create a seamless process to, sort of verify people, identity, and et cetera, et cetera. And there are sort of three elements here, or rather, the simplest way of thinking about it is that there are three elements. There's ecosystem governance, which sort of is the governance that applies to the technology for all the participants in an ecosystem, they being a credential issuer, a credential holder, and a credential verifier. And again, if you move backwards a little bit, step back a bit, when we talk about a verifiable credential, we're talking about a sort of a container for data that can be verified. So you have those who issue, you have those that hold, and those that present. So, if I'm using a digital travel credential, the passport office would issue a credential, I would hold it and present it at a border agent who would then verify it. So that you have that governance. Then you have to decide on all sorts of rules, what credential format am I going to use? Who are going to be issuers in this system, and then you take those rules and then you implement them as you encode them as machine readable files, and then you propagate them to every participant using the technology. And it's sort of, it goes into the software, and that enables all the magic to happen, so to speak. And so we have, that's machine readable governance. And so you know, sort of a governance authority creates ecosystem governance and then implements it in machine readable governance. And then you have network governance, and that pertains to mostly to those who are creating ecosystems, who are issuing credentials. They're going to write certain metadata to a distributed ledger or or sometimes called a verifiable data registry. And there is a whole bunch of governance around running a network. And then there are sort of legal agreements that a credential issuer would have to agree to in order to issue a credential. And, you know, foremost on that, or, you know, the most important thing there is don't write any personal data to a blockchain. So broadly speaking, you have these three areas and these three elements, and they comprise governance for a solution.
All right, awesome. I can see how it would get complicated when you talk about governance, and there's immediately three sub levels of governance.
Exactly. You know, it's not, you know, it's not for nothing that you know, the philosopher William of Ockham you know, urged using a razor to eliminate, you know, sort of unnecessary entities. But this actually is a kind of simplified version. So if you've got to think of the best way of thinking about it, really, is that you have to write your rules, then you have to get your rules to the people using the system. And that's basically it. You don't really need to, you know, unless you're a credential issuer, you don't really need to think about network governance, because you're not likely to be running a network. You can evaluate them. Of course, you have to evaluate which network meets my needs, but that's not that is not you know, not something you need to dive into immediately in order to understand how the technology works and how to start building.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is our kind of broad goal here, is that don't let governance stop you from building solutions.
So, right, if you're an organization that knows about these three different areas of governance, which ones are kind of the ones to look into, and why should you care, you know, about how you implement these rules, like you said?
Well, so governance is really what makes a verifiable credential, which is, again, the thing that holds verifiable data valuable, right? You can't really use it, you know, without knowing, you know, you need to know who to trust in a system where verifiable credentials are being issued and shared. You need, from a business perspective, you need to think about how you want to interoperate. You know, what kind of, you know, how do you want to work on multiple systems? So there'll be choices that you've got to make, technical choices that you have to make in order that your solution can work as widely as possible. You want to expand, so you want to think about what kind of technical choices are you making and policies that you're choosing. If you want your technology to be able to evolve, because you know, this is not a static technology. So governance is really it's implied in pretty much any technical solution. So it's there to some degree, whether you want it or not. But by making it explicit, you can hone in on what's valuable about it, and you know, sort of create the value by creating the rules that enable people to share verifiable data, which is a kind of transformational power in digital interaction. You know, data that you can immediately act on because you can trust it.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of taking from that is it sounds like it comes down a lot to user experience. Would that be accurate to say it's user experience for the organization creating the rules and for the people that live by the rules, or is it not so similar to that at all?
Well, it's to be usable in any sort of way. I mean, you know, I could issue a credential, you know, because you know, say, you know, Trevor's Internet Identity Authority Emporium. And I could you know, sort of say, give you a credential, and, you know, but it wouldn't be much use if there wasn't a governance framework around how, say, I dealt with identity assurance. So, for instance, if you're a bank and you want to create an account credential, you're going to go through an identity assurance process. Well, that's part of governance. And you know, the somebody that's not about somebody that's a store, and they want to have a kind of a credential so you can use coupons. Well, they're not going to need as much identity assurance as a bank. But when it comes to a system where you want to verify identity, you're going to want to encode rules that say, well, we trust the bank's credential more than we trust, Spud You Like Potatoes club membership. So it's all about, sort of governance is about making the system work in a way that it can be trusted, right? We have a technology for trust, but we have to put rules in there in order to make decisions about who and what information we need in order to act on whatever it is that we want to act. So that's really, so that's more or less. I mean, of course, there's an element of user experience, but really, it's about value. It's about how do we, create these systems to deliver value, and we can only do that by having rules for who you trust in terms of creating the information. So again, a government passport office, there's a high level of trust there because we know they have extensive identity assurance processes. So if they issue a verifiable credential, that, and as we're seeing with, say, digital travel credentials, that those digital travel credentials can be used for many different purposes because the governance ensures that they are trustworthy, and the governance within a system can recognize that trustworthiness so that when you present a DTC, you can cross a border instantly.
All right, awesome. No, I appreciate the real world examples there. I think that really puts it into perspective really well. In terms of kind of hands-on, obviously Indicio works implementing governance all the time. What does Indicio's approach look like when helping someone set up the governance for their system?
So we are advocates of building fast. Now, in part, that's because you only truly understand what your governance needs are when you're actually building a solution, because you can't predict until you start working with partners or governments. You can't necessarily fully understand what needs to be implemented, what are the rules that need to be implemented in order to make the thing work, the outcome happen. What we see that, this is the technology that is, you can use it today. You don't have to wait for somebody to come up with the perfect constitution for decentralized identity governance, because you can make all of these decisions today and implement these decisions in a framework, and you can update them if you need to update them. Related to that, our advice is always to build with maximum flexibility in mind. So instead, there are many different credential formats. They have different uses. The sort of the wisest approach is to build so that you can accept any kind of credential. And that just simply gives you more flexibility. So you're not tied into something forever, because, things, again, technology changes and evolves. So you want to be able to anticipate that. We also argue that you should use DID methods that allow end-to-end communication. Again, this is because there is an immediate value to decentralized identity technology and verifiable data. But as with any powerful technology, there are many, many use cases that people will develop and innovate on based around having a maximal feature set. So we strongly believe that you shouldn't limit yourself, that you should sort of build with all the bells and whistles so that when the opportunity comes, you can toot your horn and win in a competitive landscape, or simply be interoperable with the future. So those are kind of two of the things that we advocate. But again, it's a sort of, we also obviously we recommend using machine readable governance because it's the simplest way to implement governance. There's no middle party, there's no friction of, say, using an outside trust registry in order to verify trust, sort of who's an issuer of credentials. You're able to deal with offline functionality. It's faster, it's simpler, it just works. And machine readable governance is now under development at the Decentralized Identity Foundation as a specification. So it's very powerful, it's very simple. We've created a governance editor that can help you write the relevant information as a publishable machine readable file. So we strongly advocate that approach. Others don't. Others there are different ways to arrive at the same destination. But our experience in working with customers and working with governments, and particularly around the digital travel credential, we have machine readable governance has simply made our solutions work and work fast.
All right.
And work effectively.
I think, yeah, that is definitely one of the biggest things is how efficient it can be when you're processing a lot of different identities
you also
and data.
want you also want the organization or the authority that has the jurisdictional responsibility to be the ones who are closest to the enacting governance, right? So if you're the governance authority, you want to be able to change rules really quickly. So we saw that, this all stems from our experience working with Aruba during the COVID pandemic. They needed the flexibility to be able to decide what tests were acceptable, how long a test would be valid, and to be able to very quickly change that information as information changes. And that enabled them to be accountable for the role that they represent within government. And we believe everybody should have, who's creating an ecosystem, should be able to have that same flexible power, so that they can make the best decisions because they're the ones who have the best knowledge of their own use case. So that's, I think, the more philosophical defense of our position. But it was built on experience, which is, again, in this, sort of a powerful emergent technology, you're going to learn by doing, not by waiting and waiting for somebody else to decide this is the way. The way is the way that's being built now with solutions now. So and just build with the flexibility to change when the way changes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Trevor. I appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. If you at home are interested in decentralized identity technology and would like to learn more, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll continue to bring you smart educational content. If you have any questions or specific topics that you'd like for us to cover, please go ahead and leave a comment below. We'll be sure to read and address them. And thank you again to you, Trevor. If people would like to learn more about what we've been discussing here today, where would you suggest they look?
Well, the article, the overview of governance article is live on the indicio.tech website, so you can start there. We're going to be looking at a lot of different governance issues over the next few weeks. So you can either keep checking back or you can sign up for a governance newsletter, which will be a nice way of collating all of this information with handy links, so they won't be forgotten. So yeah, I urge you to do that. Keep reading, keep checking the site.